All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Steve Caton. Steve, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Kevin. I feel the same way. I've been looking forward to this for a couple weeks. So thanks for having
Same.
me. Yeah.
What's cool is you and I want to give a shout out to David Weaver, because he's the one that introduced you and I.
Yep.
And man, I love David, and he doesn't live too. He lives here in Washington State, not too far from me and stuff.
Right.
And you know what I mean. And David, he's a father too and stuff. And man, I love the way that he talks about his kids and the time he
Mm.
spends with his kids and stuff. And they have all these adventures that they go on and stuff, and hiking and all that. And
Yeah.
and and Steve is just, David is just a heart-centered guy. And when you get introduced to somebody via somebody like David, when David was like, Kev, I think this friend of mine, Steve, might be a good guy for you to get to know, and maybe you might even want to interview him for your podcast. Well, as soon as David's telling me that, I'm like, heck yeah, anybody that you would suggest, I definitely want to get to know.
Yeah.
And so you and I have had a couple conversations and getting to know each other, and I don't know what it's felt like for you, Steve, but for me, from our very first conversation, it felt like you and I had known each other for years.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so,
Yeah. No question about it. And I affirm all of what you said about David. David and I had this similar experience when we connected. It was just immediate kind of personal connection that went beyond the business stuff we were talking about and just went much deeper than that right away. So he's a quality individual. And then like you, if he makes an introduction, I'm going to prioritize that one every time
yeah.
because every time he makes an introduction, this kind of thing happens where the people that he connects me with, he just understands how people are wired, I think. And so he knew you and I would have a lot of similar wiring and affinity. And yeah, that was evident the first time we spoke. So
Yeah,
that's
for
awesome.
sure. And
Yeah.
you know what? What a testament to the power of right relationships right there, which of
Yeah.
course is what this podcast is all about. And
Yeah.
so what I want to do to start with, is I want to turn over to you, Steve, so that we can set a little bit of context. I want to be able to let our listeners know, about you and what you're all about. And so what I want you to do is I'm going to kind of go broad here, but I'm just going to but in doing that, just give you some leeway, rather than trying to keep you like narrow down. This is the path I want to just open it up. We're just gonna have a chill, easy conversation.
Yeah.
But
I love that.
I
Love
want you
that.
to I want you to be able to share, about what you do and who you serve and what inspires you most about the
Mm.
work you get to do. And also give us some of the backstory of how'd you even get here, kind of a thing.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, I so appreciate the fact that you're giving me an opportunity to share that story, but also just how relaxed and, no surprise relational this is. So, what a great format. So, would you like me to start with just the backstory
Yeah, start
for the
there. That's a
company?
great
Would
place
that
to
make
start.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it would be helpful. What I'll say, let me just share kind of one or two sentences about what it is my company does,
Okay.
and then I'll share kind of that story about how did I get to that idea.
Okay.
And essentially, my company, which is called Altezza, Altezza is an Italian word that means altitude. So when I describe what we do, that'll make some sense. But part of the reason I named it that's because I was living in Colorado at the time, and when you live in Colorado, everything's about altitude and mountains, right?
Right.
So, um, but what we do at Altezza is we're providing fractional sales expertise and actually fractional sales execution because too many brilliant founders are trapped doing sales instead of leading the vision that they've been called to, right? And so what we want to do is we want to step in and we want to drive the revenue growth and free them up as founders or business owners to focus on what truly matters. And those are typically the things that are going to build towards that extraordinary future that they're hoping for. And that being trapped in the sales process is very real for emerging growth businesses that were started by a visionary innovator. And we all have to sell for a while. And then you get to that point where it's like, okay, I need to stop selling because I've got to focus on the other things that are going to grow my business. But holy cow, hiring salespeople is not an easy task. So that's what we do, and really the whole company is inspired by my backstory. So I love that you are asking about that, Kevin, because I've been in sales my whole life. It's all I've ever done.
Okay.
And I started off in real estate with a friend of mine, and we did that for 11 years. And then I felt called to go to Southern California and go to work for a .com back in the late 90s when the first .com boom was going. I just thought that would be so cool. And that company got bought. The one I went to work for got bought, and that is what took me to Colorado, where I spent the next 23 years of my life. And I found out in the midst of all that, I kind of found out something about myself, and that was that when a company got to a certain size, in terms of revenue and employee count and whatnot, I started getting super restless because God kind of wired me as an innovator and a starter. And so when you put me in a early stage growth company, I'm thriving. And as
Okay.
soon as it starts to feel a little bit more like routine and lots of systems and processes and all that stuff, which I value, then I get bored, right? And I start getting restless, and especially if there's not innovation involved. And a lot of times, unfortunately, the bigger companies get, the more innovation kind of starts to decline. So,
Mhm.
so anyway, I've learned that about myself in my that would probably have been in my early 30s or so.
Okay.
So I started, pursuing these early stage growth companies, a lot of them technology firms, and coming in and helping them with this problem that I was seeing of trying to bring in that first salesperson. And sometimes that was a lot of times it was me, and so I would come in and be this, kind of. I was a fractional salesperson before there was even such a term. Like I didn't even know the term fractional back in those days, right? I just called myself a consultant or a part-time sales, expert or whatever. But I just saw this pattern over and over again where the owners were trying desperately to get out of sales, either because they knew they needed to or they hated it and they were just doing it out of necessity, but they didn't have the sales framework or the go-to-market strategy to really attract top-tier salespeople. So they'd go hire, inexperienced salespeople who didn't, really know better yet because they're just too inexperienced, or people who are willing to work on a commission-only basis, and those situations almost always don't work out. And so I was just like, hey, let me help. Let me come in and kind of build some of the sales infrastructure, and then I'll run sales and do sales for a while, and hopefully we can get revenue to the point where we can start bringing in a team. So that's what I was doing. And then I got hired by a couple of those companies and was with them for one of them for about 10 years. And then, but that experience was planting the seed for this business idea that is now called Alteza. But you know how it is, Kevin. I was raising kids, then I'm putting kids through college. So I'm like, no way I'm in a place where I feel like I can step off the ledge and start a business. So I just kind of, waited and waited and waited for the time to feel like it was right. Well, my last child graduated from college, and I felt like that would be the time, right? Well, what was happening when he graduated from college? This thing called COVID. So in the middle of this pandemic, I'm thinking, is this the right time to start a business? I don't know, man. This feels kind of scary. But oddly enough, the fact that COVID kind of opened all of our eyes to this idea of remote work, and we were all kind of forced to wrap our head around it, actually worked in our favor because Altez is 100% remote. Our salespeople are remote. They're selling remotely. So, there was more of an openness to the concept when we went to market with it. So I think in some ways COVID was a blessing. So anyway, so there you go. There's what we do, and there's how I got there in a
Yeah.
very abbreviated way, even though it felt longer than I wanted it
That's
to.
all right. That's all right. So who is so now so you're like then about 5 years in, 5.5 years in since launching
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
who's your ideal kind of client that you can get the best results for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we've learned, and we've learned the answer to that question by doing it with multiple types
Yeah.
of clients. And what we've learned is that professional services firm or technology firm that's in that somewhere between 1 million in revenue and 5 million in revenue, that and where the founder is still very much kind of trapped in the sales motion, that absolutely describes the ideal client for us.
Okay.
And because the way we sell works really well with those kinds of companies because we're a highly relational, very consultative type of sales team.
Mhm.
So it works well in that context. And those companies typically you can sell remotely for them very easily. They don't need the boots on the ground salespeople, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
that, if you look at the sweet spot of the customers that we've worked with over the last, 4.5 years where we've had the most success, that's what they would look like.
Okay. Okay. And what and do you just come in and install a whole sales team and stuff? Do you just kind of like what does that look like when you start serving a client?
Well, we can go, the spectrum runs from working with a company that basically has built all of the sales infrastructure and go-to-market strategy and the playbooks and all that, and they just need a really effective salesperson to plug into that.
Okay.
So that would be one end of the spectrum. We would kind of call that our do-it-yourself spectrum. So we just kind of we do a true match process, give them the right salesperson or people, and then turn them loose.
Okay.
The other end of the spectrum is a business where all of the sales process and the sales strategy and the sales infrastructure and systems lives right here in the head of the founder. And
Mhm.
so what we have to do is get it out of their head and
Extract
onto
all that.
paper and document it and build it so that when we plug a salesperson in, there's actually some rails for them to run on.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be our kind of done for you,
Okay.
that's the done for you kind of pathway that we talk
Okay.
about. And then the middle is one called done with you, where they've got a little bit to work with, like they've built some of that, and some of that is documented. They just need a little bit of tweaking and refining and some help with the onboarding and training process with the new salespeople. And we
Okay.
will do that. We'll stay with them for a period of 90 days and help them get in the groove, and then they're off to the races. So yeah, we work with the companies in all ends of that spectrum.
Okay. Very cool. So now what is a result that you've helped somebody get that you're just like incredibly proud of?
Oh man, obviously being in sales, as you know, Kevin, sales is always about numbers, right? So we're always talking about, oh, we increase sales by 40% or we increase
Mhm.
sales conversion by 100%. And we've got those stories to tell. We've got really incredible stories to tell about, written doubling revenue growth within a period of 6 months or deal flow or sales conversion, all those things. And I love those stories. But the one that really, this goes to the inspirational piece for me. The thing that inspired me to do this was the fact that I saw these founders that are stuck in the sales trap and can't grow the business. I saw them dealing with a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of burnout, a lot of inability to have the balance with their family, like you were talking about with David earlier.
Mhm.
And so for me, that's why I do it. That's why I get up is I want to be somehow play a role in helping those business owners and those founders get unlocked from the things that are holding them back so they can experience the freedom they dreamed of when they started their business. So one of the stories that I heard, we heard a couple of years ago was one of our clients actually had their salesperson come out to the physical location of their business for a team meeting. They had like a it might have even been a Christmas party now that I think about it. But they invited him out. They wanted to meet him in person. And so he's hanging out and getting to know all these people that he'd interacted with on Zoom all this time. And the owner's wife comes up to him and says, "Hey, I know, everybody's patting you on the back for all the sales that you've helped us with, but I just want to tell you, I want to thank you for doing what you do because my husband is home for dinner way more often than he was before." And so that kind of stuff is where that hits a chord right here in me that is way different than the sales stuff, which I still get excited about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. That is so awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Man, I'm feeling you when you share that, because that's ultimately what it's all about. It's like,
Yeah,
that's what he wanted when he started that business that he didn't get to have once the business got to the level,
that's right.
and
Yeah.
and now not only for him, but that his wife is coming to you and saying, "Man, I get to see my husband more, and that's what I want,"
Yeah. I know,
And
right?
that's so awesome. That is
Yeah.
so awesome. Yeah. Well, that was a good job at setting some context there. So, okay, so now that we've got that done, we'll switch gears just a little bit, not too much, but I'm gonna reiterate the question around relationships for the benefit of our listeners. So, Steve, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, man. When you told me that's what we would be talking about, it really I really appreciated it because it really forced me to go back and kind of reflect on the people that I've intersected with over the course of my career, and really help me kind of relive those moments and remember how much I appreciate them. So thank you for the fact that you're even having this conversation. I think it's really awesome because we don't get wherever we are in life, we don't get there by ourselves, right? It's always
Right. That's right.
it's through the help that we get from other people who and we intersect with on the journey along the way. So for me, there were like, as I was thinking about that, Kevin, there were like four people that really came to
Okay.
mind because what you said there about people that really had a major influence and maybe changed the trajectory that I was on.
Mhm.
So I was thinking about that. So obviously when I think, the first person I thought about was my dad, because watching him as I was growing up as a young man, what I saw was a guy with a ton of passion and a ton of drive, just a lot of fire, passion, and energy. And that I felt like, I internalized that. But my dad was a banker. He was in banking and finance, and he really wanted me to go into that line of work. And so I got a degree in economics with a minor in marketing and thought I was going to go to work in financial services. But as I started interviewing with companies like that, I was like, man, this is not me at all. Like I know, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I know it's not that. I could not envision myself putting on a suit and tie every day and going to,
Uh-huh.
you know what I'm
Uh-huh.
saying? No disrespect, but that just wasn't feeling it, and my dad, of course, was disappointed. But the guy I met at that season of life was a guy, his name was David, and he he had left a really high paying, successful job in the pharmaceutical industry, and he was starting a real estate company in North Georgia.
Okay.
And we knew we were family friends, and so he knew me, and he called me into his office and was just talking through me about what do you want to do. And he came up with the idea of, hey, you know what, why don't you just go get your real estate license and come sell real estate with me for a little while until you figure out what you want to do with your life. And I was like, well, that sounds like a cool idea. And I had actually taken enough real estate courses in college that I didn't have to go through the course. I could just go take the test and get the license.
Wow.
So I
Okay.
did that. And this guy, David, he basically was the guy, he was 10 years older than me. And he taught me everything he knew about relational sales. So relationship driven sales. So he taught me, how to build rapport, how to ask really good open-ended questions, how to shut up and listen, things that a lot of other salespeople need to learn. You know what I'm saying? So he taught me this relational approach to sales that was incredible for me, very powerful. And I made a lot more money in real estate, let's just say that, than I would have working in a bank at that time. So I was very happy and I loved what I was doing. I met a lot of great people. And so he had a huge impact. I exited that business after 11 years
Okay.
and went out and I decided I wanted to chase the dot-com, craze that was happening in the late 90s. So I went out and went to work at a dot-com. And I did that. And then there was I don't know, probably about another, I would say somewhere in a 5 to 10 year stretch there. And I got a job with a company and that was outside of Chicago in Rockford, Illinois. And it was a financial services company, ironically, wealth management, but they had hired me to build a portfolio of clients within the nonprofit sector because I had a lot of experience in that sector, so I could speak their language and whatnot. And my relational sales approach worked really well in that sector because their nonprofits tend to be very relational, very much driven by trust, right? So I'm out there but I wasn't converting, I wasn't converting the deals at the rate that I was before. And so the owner of this firm connected me to a guy named Doug Sherman. And Doug Sherman, at the time when I met him, he had held the record for the highest score on the math portion of the entrance exam to the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
And I'm living in Colorado Springs at this point in time, so I understand the Air Force Academy and all that goes with that. And I'm like, I was impressed with that. I was like, that's a smart dude right there, especially since I sucked at math. So I was like, I can't even imagine. So anyway, so this guy, he was the fact that he got kind of dropped into my career path was a bit of a miracle because this guy, he had a company that did sales consulting for companies like Boeing. So at
Okay.
the time I was working with him, his company was working with Boeing to help them overcome they were kind of getting their butt kicked by Airbus at the time.
I
And so
remember
he
that.
and he was helping them navigate through that and change their whole sales process so that they could convert, and win more of those big contracts. And they were very successful as a result of his work. What he taught me, Kevin, was sales process. So no one had ever taught me about sales process.
Mhm.
David was amazing with the relational sales piece, but when it comes to the discipline of sales process and all the steps in the process and having to build consensus with multiple stakeholders and how do you keep up with all that, first time I ever heard it. So it took a whole different, provided a whole different skill set to me that I never had before. And it was just like, oh
Wow.
my gosh, this is incredible. So now I've got process and I have relational. It was like off to the races after that from a trajectory perspective in my sales career. It just went to a whole different level.
Wow.
And yeah, it was incredible. And I'll pause there because I feel like I've been talking a lot, but anything that you want to ask about either of those two guys
Well,
before I
no,
keep
no.
going?
I mean, I was writing down notes because because my mind always does, but just based on stuff that you shared, I'm like, oh, I want because now I'm thinking about who I want to connect you with somebody. I can't stop my brain from working that
That's just
way.
how it works. I know, man. I'm already doing the same with you. So,
Yeah.
um,
And so, no, I mean, I am gonna definitely have a questions to ask you, but I want to
okay.
let you get through
Okay.
and yeah, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, fast forward a few years later, I'm at this inflection point where it was actually after I was done working at that company where I met Doug. That company got sold.
Okay.
And when they sold the company, I was offered the opportunity to move to Rockford or Chicago and be part of the team there. But I was already entrenched in Colorado Springs, raising our kids there. I knew for a fact if I went to my wife and said, "Hey, babe, we're moving to Chicago," she would have punched me or divorced me. So I was like, "We're not doing that." So I just wasn't, I wasn't, it was, one of those things you're just not feeling it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm now looking for something else. And of course, I had a lot of opportunities, and what I was at this stage in my life though, Kevin, where I was trying to make a choice based on significance instead of the money, because I'm in my 40s, and how that shift happens, I think, for a lot of guys in our 40s, where we start thinking a little bit more about significance and less, not that the money doesn't matter, but there's just things that become more important. So I'm trying to do something based on significance and where I can really make an impact in an organization I care about. And so God airdrops this guy into my life named Jerry Melchizedek, which is a crazy name when I think about it, but because of the biblical tie-ins of that name. But this guy is a grandfather of a kid that's on my son's football team, and so we're just
Okay.
standing on the sidelines talking about our kids and his grandkid, and we start getting into the what do you do kind of thing. And so I told him kind of where I was. Turns out he's a recruiter, but he's more of a career counselor kind of a guy, right? So he does
Okay.
recruiting but career counseling, and he just decided he was going to speak into that situation for me. And he was a man of strong faith, so he really resonated with me trying to pick a path based on significance and not just the money. And I was struggling, to be honest with you, because the money I was getting offered at some of these opportunities was really attractive, and I've still got kids to raise, and I know I'm thinking about college and all that. And the job that felt really significant to me was very low paying, like half of what I was making, right? So
Okay.
anyway, make it I'll make it quick. Jerry basically looked at me one day as we were processing it, and he said, "Bro, you told me you wanted to be about significance. This is as black and white as it'll ever be for you. Which job is about significance? So if you're really telling me the truth and you care about significance and not money, this is a no-brainer." He goes, "All you got to
Boy,
do is."
nothing like laying it on the line, huh?
Right? Like seriously, I remember when he did it, I just looked at him and I was like, "Oh, geez, thanks a lot." But like right between the eyes, right? And I remember getting emotional about it because he was right. He was absolutely right. But I was too fearful to actually do the thing I felt led to do. But I followed his advice, and I remember picking up the phone and calling the CEO of that company and saying, "I'll take the job." And then I went home and told my wife, and she was like, "What?"
Yeah.
But she knew that that was where the significant piece was. And as it turned out, it was probably the best decision that I've ever made in my career, because I was with that company for 10 years and got a chance to ride from a $2 million company to a 30 million plus company, and with an amazing team of people. It was just an awesome blessing in so many ways. So I think about Jerry and how he's just supposedly randomly dropped into my life at this pivotal moment, and that decision he helped me make was an absolute game changer for me. So
Wow.
yeah, very
That's an
much.
awesome story.
Oh, dude, yeah, it gives me goosebumps even now just to think about it. And then the last guy I want to talk about is Don Martin, and Don, is a guy who incredibly successful businessman, and he was part of the executive team at Century 21 many years ago, and they got sold, and he was able to
My
exit and make.
dad worked at Century 21 when I was a kid.
Is that right?
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, it'd be funny to see if maybe he might remember the name Don Martin, but
Yeah.
if your dad's still around. But Don's still around. It's funny, I've lost touch with all these other guys, which is a little sad, but just the way life works sometimes. But Don's still very close. He lives not far from me, but when it came to speaking into me and giving me the tools that I needed to actually lead a company, to be a business owner, that's where God brought Don into my life. So he's been pouring into me and encouraging me and really telling me, like, he was the one who kind of helped me understand that I was not doing it because I was fearful, and then I needed to step out of that fear, trust God that this was, he saw the trajectory and the story and said, this is God's created you for this moment, bro. You just need to see it. You need to own it. You need to have faith in it and take the step. And then he's been there with me still to this day whenever I need help just navigating a challenge, or, I'm having a rough day and just need a pep talk, or I need a kick in the ass, whatever it is, he's always there. And so from a business savvy,
Yeah.
business leadership standpoint, God put Don in my life for that. And
Wow.
so
Wow.
yeah, those four people, it's just amazing to me looking back that for the absolute perfect season of time that I was in, God brought the right guy for
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah.
And some of those were long relationships and some of them were just for a short season, but they were all very pivotal.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's some amazing stories. And so I'm sure you would be able to come up with a lot of different answers for the question I want to ask you now, but I just wanted you to challenge to come up with one.
Okay.
And so, what is an example of a situation where you personally you got to make this really big impact, and maybe even in the moment, maybe it even surprised you a little bit, and at the same time, though, you know that that would have never been possible if not for your relationship with any one of these four people that you've talked about.
Okay. Good question. Yeah, and I think you know what, you're right. I can think of a lot of different examples, but the one that comes, I think going with the first thing that comes up is
Uh-huh.
typically the right one.
Yeah.
So when I left that company, that I talked about, that Jerry Melchizedek had a hand in me stepping into, the one that wasn't paying very much, but ended
Yeah.
up being a huge opportunity. When I left that company to go to my next chapter, the people that I was working with for many years and the people that I had the privilege of leading over the years, they had this kind of spontaneous little going away party. And we all got in a room at a restaurant, and they just kind of one by one went around the room talking about the impact that I had had on them. And they gave me this cool kind of caricature of me with all their signatures on it and a little word of encouragement. And but as they went around sharing all the things like that I had things that I'd done or inspired them to do or whatever, it was just like, holy cow. It's hard even now to think about it without the emotions coming back. But it was powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And you know,
And that wouldn't have been possible if Jerry hadn't gotten in my face,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and pretty much called you out and said, "Look,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is what you told me you
This is
wanted.
what you
Were
told
you
me.
lying to me or were you telling me the truth?"
That's basically what he
Yeah.
said. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if it weren't for that, then I would never have had the opportunity to experience that amazing blessing of seeing the difference that I made in other people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and I'll tell you, I don't know the situation that, but with all those people working at that company, and because of their roles in that company, I can only imagine the ripple effect of that has gone on of to this day, and it is continuing to go on because of the way that you impacted those people and how many other lives were impacted as a result. You'll never know that.
Yeah.
But when we start thinking about that, man, it gets a little bit mind boggling because when we serve the right people, the impact gets to be huge. And it's not about more work, it's not about harder work. It's just about showing up and being us and
Yeah.
serving the right people,
That's right. Yeah.
and and through that we get to have this huge impact and stuff,
Yeah.
and what a beautiful example of that you just shared, and
Yeah.
so for
Yeah.
anybody, go ahead. Do you
It
feel
would be,
like
I
you?
I feel like what you said is so true. And I think it's a little sad that we don't get to fully see the picture of that. It'd
Yeah,
be nice, but I feel like, sometimes you catch glimpses of it, right? And which is so much fun when that happens. Like what I was telling you before we jumped on and recorded, I've got this glass over here that I'm enjoying
yeah,
a little sip of whiskey in, and the glass says, go with others. And it was a gift that was given to me by one of the guys that was there that night.
Wow.
And that was a lot of what he was saying was echoing what you said, which is, hey, there's going to be a ripple effect of the time that you spent with these people that you won't ever get to see, but you'll have this glass to remind you of that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And now, so how many years ago was that?
I left there in 2000 and that would have been 2007, 16 actually.
2016, so
Yeah,
almost nine years ago. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
and now here this glass. Because for nobody's going to know this, but before we started recording, you showed me this glass and told me about this glass. And
yeah.
9 years later, that glass is meaningful to you
It
because
sure
of
is.
what it stands for.
Yeah, yeah,
And and it's just a reminder of that time period, of that experience, of what just came to be because of that.
that's right.
And yeah, that's kind of an anchor, which is that's a cool thing when we can have those anchors in our life.
Yeah,
And
amen.
well, I'll tell you, for anybody, I just really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today, Stephen. For anybody that's listening to this going, man, Kev, I really like Steve, and maybe some of them are even thinking like, man, maybe Steve might be able to help us, or maybe I know somebody else that I want to introduce to Steve. How can they find out more about you and the work? In any websites, any resources we can share with folks?
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. So, my company, you can find us on the web at altezasolutions.com. And if
Okay.
it's helpful, I can, send that to you. You can share it, in show notes or whatever there,
Yeah.
but it's Alteza with two Z's, solutions.com. And then for me personally, LinkedIn is the best place to connect with
Okay.
me. Luckily, there's not a lot of Catons on LinkedIn, so Steve Caton is pretty easy to find, especially if you add the word Alteza or even put Georgia behind it, because that's where I live. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn. I connect with people there all the time. I really enjoy that, and any way I can help people, whether it be navigating their own career journey or helping them. One guy told me one time after I was talking to him about his sales situation, he said, "That was like a sales therapy session, Steve." I was like, awesome. So I'm happy to do that. However I can help, like you, Kevin, I'm going to give back. And
Yeah.
some of
Yes.
the stuff that's been done for me over the years, I want to pay that forward. So yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, once again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, Steve,
Mm.
and I'm looking forward to getting this out there and share it with a lot of other folks. So thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It was an honor.